All right, let's dive deep into one of the biggest topics in organizational behavior, motivation. In this session, we're going to break down the core theories you've absolutely got to know to ace that exam.
Okay, so at its heart, this entire subject really just comes down to one single core question. What actually is motivation? What really makes people tick? Okay, so this is the textbook definition you're going to want to remember for the exam. But let's make it simple. Direction is, well, it's what you're trying to do. Intensity is how hard you're actually trying. And persistence? That's all about how long you can keep it up. Put them all together, and that's the whole picture of your effort. Okay, so we know what it is, but how does that process actually play out? To understand that, we need to look at the mechanics, the how of motivation. And we're going to start with one of the biggest ones out there, expectancy theory. So, what is this theory all about? Well, it's actually pretty intuitive. It basically says we're motivated when we can answer yes to three key questions. First, if I put in the effort, will I actually perform well? Second, if I perform well, is there a reward waiting for me? And the big one, third, do I even want that reward? And for your exam, you have to remember this three-step chain. So, expectation, that's the link between your effort and your performance. Instrumentality is what connects that performance to a reward. And valence is just a fancy word for how much you actually value that reward. The key thing here is that if even one of these links is broken, the whole chain falls apart. No motivation. So that first link we talked about, expectancy, will my effort lead to good performance? Well, that's powered by something called self-efficacy theory. And this is crucial. It's not about general, everyday confidence. It's your deep down belief that you have what it takes to succeed at one specific task. Think of it as your confidence for the job at hand, and wow, is it a powerful motivator. Okay, so how do we build up that task-specific confidence? Well, the theory gives us four main ways. Let's make it practical for you. When you complete a practice exam and do well, that's inactive mastery. You're gaining experience and proving to yourself you can do it. When you see a classmate just like you nail a presentation, that's vicarious modeling. You've got to know these four for the exam. All right, next up is goal-setting theory. And listen, this is one of the most well-supported theories out there. It's so simple, but so powerful. Basically, vague goals like, I'm going to study hard, they just don't work. What does work are specific and difficult goals, like, I will finish summarizing these 3 chapters by 5 p.m. today. When you pair a goal like that with feedback on how you're doing, that's a recipe for high performance. So we've just been talking all about the how of motivation. Let's switch gears now and talk about the what. What are the actual things, the fundamental needs that drive us in the first place? Now, this theory suggests that each of us is primarily driven by one of 3 core motivators. So think about yourself for a second. Are you the kind of person who just loves to excel, to succeed, to hit those targets? That's a high need for achievement. Or maybe you're someone who wants to influence others, to be in charge. That's a need for power. And then there's the need for affiliation. That's for people who thrive on close, friendly relationships. The idea is one of these is your main driver. Okay, this next one, self-determination theory, brings up a really fascinating point. It says that we all have this deep need to feel like we're in control of our own actions, right? But here's the kicker. If you take something someone already loves doing, say a hobby, and you start paying them for it, you can actually kill their natural internal motivation. The fun gets replaced by a feeling of obligation. And this slide right here perfectly breaks down that difference, which is absolutely critical for your exam, so listen up. Intrinsic motivation, that's the stuff that comes from inside, like feeling autonomous or competent. That's what drives the quality of work. On the other hand, extrinsic motivation, things like your salary or a bonus, that tends to drive the quantity of work. Get that distinction right and you're golden. So if those intrinsic drivers are so important, how do we get more of them? Well, that's where the job characteristic model, or JCM, comes in. The core idea here is really powerful. Maybe the biggest motivator isn't your boss or your salary, but the design of the job itself. The argument is that a well-designed job is just naturally motivating. So, what exactly makes a job motivating? The JCM boils it down to these 5 core characteristics. Take task identity, for instance. That's the difference between building a whole piece of furniture from start to finish versus just screwing in the same leg on an assembly line all day. You can see how one is way more motivating. And here's a huge tip. If you see a question about job design on your exam, these 5 characteristics are what you need to know. And here's how it all fits together. The model shows a clear flow. You start with those 5 job characteristics. Those then trigger what are called critical psychological states, things like feeling that your work is meaningful or feeling responsible for how it turns out. And those feelings are what lead to the good stuff: high motivation, great performance, and job satisfaction. All right, we've got one more big theory to cover, and this one is a bit different. So far, we've been focused on the individual, but motivation doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? It's social, and that brings us to the powerful idea of fairness. At its core, equity theory is about one thing: social comparison. We are hardwired to look around and compare ourselves to others. We're constantly asking, maybe not even out loud, is this fair? We're always doing this mental math. What am I putting in, my effort, my time, my skills, versus what am I getting out, my pay, recognition, promotions? And we don't just do that math for ourselves. We're constantly comparing our own ratio of outcomes to inputs with somebody else's, a reference person. This could be a coworker, a friend, whoever. And here's the bottom line. If that comparison feels balanced, great, we feel motivated. But if it feels unbalanced, if we feel like we're getting a raw deal, that creates this uncomfortable tension, and we become motivated to do something to fix it. All right, that was a lot of theory. Let's do a super quick recap of the absolute essentials you need to walk away with for your exam. Okay, first big takeaway: expectancy theory. Remember that 3-part chain? Your motivation depends on believing your effort leads to performance, that performance leads to rewards, and that those rewards are actually valuable to you. Second, remember that your own belief in your ability, your self-efficacy, is a massive factor. Combine that with specific challenging goals, and you've got a powerhouse for motivation. Next, the big one: self-determination theory. The takeaway? Intrinsic motivation drives quality work. Extrinsic rewards, like money, drive quantity. But be careful, because they can kill that intrinsic drive. And don't forget the job characteristic model. Jobs with variety, identity, significance, autonomy, and feedback are just plain more motivating. And last but definitely not least, equity theory. The big idea here is that fairness is a huge motivator. We're always comparing our input to outcome ratio with others, and if we feel things are unfair, that's a massive motivation killer. Now, to make sure you can actually apply all this and really nail your exam, head over to gradeguru.nl. We've got the full summary and a ton of practice tests waiting for you. So as you wrap up your studying, I want you to think about this question for a second. Which of these theories best explains your motivation to pass this exam? Really think about it, because understanding what drives you is the absolute first step to mastering it. All right, good luck.